Hello and welcome to the FatBoss Guide to Cenarius in the Emerald Nightmare.
Now this encounter is probably the hardest one you've got to so far in this instance. It's a two-phase encounter where phase 1 you're pretty much dealing with ads the entire time, and then the last phase is just a burn phase. You need to kill Cenarius before he kills you with all these red gooey patches on the ground, as well as all of his other abilities that are in play. Now the key to defeating this boss is really just understanding exactly how all of his ads work, and in which order you need to deal with them during phase 1. Phase 2, providing you get there nice and cleanly and you transition into the phase well, is an absolute piece of cake. Now before we talk about the ads, Cenarius has some things you need to deal with. Now he has an aura called Dreadthorns. This aura makes it so any ads within 20 yards of him on normal mode and 30 yards in heroic mode receive a buff that reflects 50% of the damage they take back to the player that dealt it. So if you're tanking all the ads directly underneath the boss, all your DPS are going to end up killing themselves, so you need to make sure that you always tank the ads outside the aura. Now Cenarius will also periodically apply this aura to himself. It's a good idea to track the boss's buffs so you can see when it's up on him and stop damaging. Again, you're going to kill yourself. Now the most frustrating ability for you guys to deal with throughout this entire encounter is an ability called Nightmare Brambles. When the boss casts this ability, what will happen is that a patch of brambles will spawn near a player and then fixate on somebody in the raid and chase them down. Now while these brambles are moving around the room, they'll actually leave patches on the ground. If anyone's caught out by these or stands inside them, they'll be rooted and take really high ticking damage. Now these brambles can be dispelled off the player, but ultimately you should never get caught by them in the first place. Now you can run through all these patches using things like Cloak and Turtle to clear them up without being rooted, and Hand of Freedom also works, however you're still going to take the damage part of the ability. So what you need to do is kite these brambles around, but this is exceptionally difficult because 1, there is absolutely no debuff or icon on the fixated player, so the only way you can work it out is by seeing exactly which direction it appears to be going in. And 2, over the course of its duration, it will randomly pick a new fixate target. And the thing is that makes this situation even worse is that no one actually understands exactly how these routes work yet. And it appears that Blizzard have just flat out designed this mechanic so it's untrackable. There are a lot of theories out there on exactly how these routes work, and we have some of our own, but ultimately none of them have been proved yet. So if anyone has a theory out there and they think it works, show us some footage and we'll fucking make a new guide. But right now, no one seems to know how they work. So the best thing to do when it comes down to dealing with these routes is simply just moving away from them. If you see them coming towards you and you're going to be caught out, and if it's obvious that they're fixating on you, move them away from the raid so they're as far away from other people as possible. And when your room starts to look pretty damn full, rogues use your cloak, paladins use your immunities and run through them, hunters use aspect of the turtle and run through them. Just try and keep the room as clear as possible. Also to deal from Cenarius is the constant ticking damage that's going out on the group. Now this ticking damage at first is almost unnoticeable, however the boss constantly applies debuffs to you that amplifies the ticking damage you take. When you reach around 20 stacks, it's very noticeable. If you go even higher than that, you're looking at pissing off your healers. Now the only way to remove this debuff is when Cenarius calls in his ads with an ability called Forces of Nightmare.
Now when he casts this, he will summon 3 Seeds of Nightmare, which will turn into enemies 10 seconds later. However, Malfurion, who happens to be in this fight, will cleanse one of these seeds. The seeds that is chosen will be the one with the most players stacked around it. Now not only does this make the ad that spawns become friendly and it'll benefit you in one way, which we'll get to in a moment, but it'll also spawn a large area of green cleansed ground. Now when players stand in this cleansed ground, they'll have their ticking damage debuff stacks completely removed. However, the patch will shrink. Because of this, you can pretty much have your entire raid reset their stacks once per cleansed green ground thing on the floor before it's completely depleted. Make sure you don't just stand in it the entire time. Make sure you don't keep running in and out of it like a nutcase. Just go up to it, have your entire raid stack around the ad that you want to cleanse, drop your debuff, and then leave it. Make sure everyone has their stacks cleansed and your healers will remain happy. Now there are always 3 different choices that you get to make per set of ads, and each set of ads is different, so you're going to be making lots of choices throughout this entire encounter. And the best choice you can make will depend on what your raid composition is good at, because different ads do have their own pros and cons that your raid will need to deal with, so really the choice is yours. However, we've been doing it and we've done it 4 times with our split runs, and we feel that we've come up with a very safe and easy way of getting through the encounter without having too many points where you're shitting yourself. So let's just go straight into it and we'll cover exactly what we do and what you need to do with the ads that do come in.
Now on the first set of ads you'll have Wisps, the Tree Dude, and the Dragon. Now we decide to cleanse the Wisps. You cleanse these guys by stacking in the top left, which is the northeast area of the room. When you cleanse these guys, they'll instantly spawn multiple small patches of cleansed ground around the room. These cleansed patches don't last forever, but it does give you more opportunities to keep your stacks low, so again, use them every single time your stacks go to around 20. And you will now have to deal with the tree guy and the drake. Now the tree has a desiccating stomp, which deals damage split between everyone stood by him. If no one is hit by this ability at all, it will just flat out one-shot your raid. So to counter this, you want to have as many players stood underneath the tree when this stomp goes off as possible. And for the drake, this guy is probably the most lethal out of all of the ads. He has a breath that's fixated on the location of a random player. As soon as you see which direction it's going in, everyone can move out the way of it. Make sure you don't get hit. However, the worst thing this guy does is that at 50% health, he'll start to deal pulsing AoE damage to the entire raid, and this ramps up extremely quickly. So what you need to do is put both of these mobs on top of each other and just nuke the living shit out of the drake, and then nuke the living shit out of the tree, while making sure you're stacked for the stomp and that you move out the way of the breath, while at the same time avoiding roots and dropping your stack.
Now once you dealt with that wave of ads, the second wave will come in shortly afterwards, and with this you have a choice between wisps, a dragon, and some sisters. You want to cleanse the wisps again. The wisps cleanse ground is extremely good at reducing overall damage taken, so you just want to take the wisps whenever you can get them. Now you'll be seeing this new ad, which is the Twisted Sister. Now these sisters have 3 abilities. One is a dispellable dot that you just need to dispel. One is an interruptible heal called Twisted Touch of Life. This needs to be interrupted 100% of the time. This going off can heal the boss, and that would very quickly lead to a wipe. And the last one is a debuff called Scorned Touch. This will slow you and cause you to explode when it expires, dealing damage to you and spreading the debuff to anyone within your targeting circle. And this debuff will spread if you immune it off with things like cloak, so if you're a rogue and trying to be clever by cloaking it off when you're a melee, it's going to spread to everyone in the entire fucking raid. So do your best to, if you are going to immune it off, run out of the way of anyone, explode outside, and then come back to the group. Now you actually want to nuke the sister off first because of her low HP, then you want to switch to the dragon, nuke it off while avoiding its breath, and make sure that you really burst it down when it reaches 50% health.
Now on the third set of ads, you'll have a tree and 2 sisters. We choose to cleanse the tree. Now this tree sapling spawns in the top right hand corner or the southeast part of the room, and when he's active, the tree will cast an ability called Replenishing Roots. This will give your healers back a nice amount of mana when he casts it. He'll just raise his arms above his head, it's like a Tranquility style animation. Stand underneath him, get your mana back. While fighting the 2 sisters, make sure you're nuking one down before the other. Again, they have so little health, they're very easy to deal with. Just make sure you interrupt the heal. That is priority number 1.
On the 4th set, you have 1 set of wisps and 2 dragons. We cleanse the wisps, so now you'll be fighting 2 of these dragons at the exact same time. Do not cleave them down at all. You have to focus one before the other. If both of them start pulsating, you will hate your life and you're most likely going to die. Focus one down, mark one with the skull and absolutely annihilate it, then switch to the other one. Now at this point of the fight, you might start getting Cenarius to around 35% health, and this is when he'll trigger into phase 2. You've got to make sure that this transition is clean, so you don't want any pre-existing ads up, and you don't want any brand new ads spawning right as he transitions. So you've got to make a judgment call depending on your time as to see if you can push him in time. Using Bloodlust to transition isn't an awful idea because you'll be lusting in this last phase, and the last phase is pretty quick anyway. However, if you decided to hold off and do the next set of ads, you'll be dealing with group number 5. This is double tree and 1 sister. You don't really want to deal with double tree that often, so grab one of the trees and just deal with 1 tree and 1 sister. Once again, nuke down the sister and interrupt her whilst being stacked up underneath for the tree. This can be a little bit shit with Scorn Touch because they can overlap a little bit. Just move out, it's okay if a couple of people don't get hit by the desiccating stomp. After this, you really need to be looking at transitioning Cenarius at this point. There is one more set of ads, however with none of our groups we reach that point because your damage must be incredibly low to reach that 6th set. Just try and get a little bit more damage out on the boss, be multi-dotting him throughout the fight and that kind of stuff, just to make sure you push him into the next phase before the next set spawn.
Now once you've made that transition into the last phase with absolutely no ads up whatsoever because you're great at doing it nice and clean, ads will no longer spawn. However, you still will have the Nightmare Brambles, and it appears that they spawn even quicker now, and you will still have the ticking damage on you and the debuff. However, now Malfurion will place the cleansed ground instead of on ads because they no longer exist. He'll just place it on the largest clump of players in your raid, which the majority of the time is just going to be in melee. As soon as it spawns, make sure you drop the stacks and then just move back out again. However, Cenarius will sometimes put a stop to this by trapping Malfurion in roots, and these roots just flat out stun him, and of course if he's stunned he can't cast any abilities, so you need to free the roots by destroying them. They do have a large amount of health, but if all your range swap to them immediately, you can kill them off without them having a massive effect on the fight. Now, a really important ability for your tanks to worry about in this phase is Spear of Nightmares. When the boss casts this ability on you, it deals a massive amount of damage and increases the amount of damage you take from this ability for 25 seconds. So every time it hits you, you want the other tank to taunt for the next one. On top of this, when you do take the damage, you'll spawn a large patch of goo on the ground, and the size of this goo is based on how hard you were hit from the ability. So it's incredibly important that when the spear's about to hit you, that you have some form of active mitigation up, any form of CD up, whether it be your own or external ones. You may want to set up some form of rotation in advance, but when we were doing it, we were just calling it out on the fly. One thing to note about this goo is that it will actually consume any cleansed ground that is spawned by Malfurion, so it's incredibly important that when the cleansed ground does spawn, you instantly take it up, and standing in the goo does do ticking damage, so you need to slowly move the boss around the room, and then the idea is, you kill him before you run out of space. And that's all there is to this last phase. It's very, very simple. So as you can see, the majority of the encounter is just dealing with these ads in phase 1. The ad choices we've shared with you are pretty much the safest way of doing it. Using the wisps just to constantly keep dropping your stacks is so much better than choosing anything else, because not only the wisps kind of annoying to deal with, but the gap between each force of nature, your stacks can go so high, your healers are just going to be tested. And being able to use healing cooldowns on things like the dragons or the stomp is way better than just using them on high stacks. But feel free to be creative with it. There's loads of different routes you can take. And if you do find a better one, share it with your friends and share it with us in the comments.
So thank you very much for watching, and before you do go, check out our sponsor Discord. Discord is a service where you can make your own server for your friends or for your guild or for your random 5-man pug, where you can make voice communications and text channels for entirely free. It is 2016, you don't have to pay for voice comms anymore. We have our own Discord server where you can come in and talk about raiding or ask us questions or talk about our videos or just generally chill out. Do check it out, the link is in the description below. And would like to say a big thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. Your continued support really does help out, so thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Catch you later.